Vegetarian Club. As a club, we try to promote awareness of issues related to vegetarianism, focusing primarily on the three most common reasons people choose to go vegetarian: health, the environment, and the treatment of animals. In addition to events like this and the Bruce Friedrich event last month, we do leafleting, tabling, host movie screenings, and have social events like vegan potlucks. And we actually have a vegan potluck, a Thanksgiving potluck coming up next week. So if you'd like to receive information and updates about events like these, you can sign our mailing list up front. And we also have literature for you to take on your way out. After Professor Singer's talk, he will be taking questions from the audience, so keep that in mind as you listen. Peter Singer is the Camp Professor of Bioethics at the University Center for Human Values at Princeton University. He's the author of numerous books, including Animal Liberation, Practical Ethics, The Ethics of What We Eat, Why Our Food Choices Matter, and most recently, The Life You Can Save, Acting Now to End World Poverty. His book, Animal Liberation, kickstarted the movement back in 1975 and earned him the title of Father of the Animal Liberation Movement. His works have appeared in more than 20 languages. The New Yorker calls him the world's most influential living philosopher, and Time magazine listed him in the Time 100, which is their annual listing of the world's 100 most influential people. Peter Singer was the founding president of the International Association of Bioethics, and with Helga Kusi, founding co-editor of the journal Bioethics. Outside academic life, he is the co-founder and president of the Great Ape Project, which is an international effort to obtain basic rights for chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans. He is also president of Animal Rights International. On a personal note, Peter Singer is part of the reason why I chose to become a vegetarian 5 years ago. He's greatly admired and has had a positive impact on many of us in the Vegetarian Club. So it is a great personal honor for us to be hosting this event today. And now, please help me welcome Peter Singer.
Thanks very much, Rusty, and thank you all of the members of the Vegetarian Club who've been responsible for organising my visit and obviously publicising it very well to turn out such a great audience. I hope you're all comfortable in one way or another wherever you're sitting. So I'm talking about the ethics of what we eat, and some people start off by saying, well, why is what we eat an ethical issue? We're used to thinking about a range of ethical issues. When we talk about ethics, we think about things to do with money often, stealing, cheating, bribery, corruption, Ponzi schemes, all of those raise ethical issues. We often think about sex in an ethical context. Politicians often run into ethical problems that way. We sometimes might think about responsibilities for the world's poor as an ethical issue. I certainly do. But what we eat, we tend, at least in our culture, not to think of as an ethical issue. Other cultures have had different views about it. But my ethical approach is to consider the consequences of what we do and ask whether the choices we make have good or bad consequences for everyone affected by them. And by that standard, I think there's no doubt that what we eat is a major ethical issue, because really it's hard to think of any choices that we make on a daily or thrice daily basis that have ramifications for the rest of the planet and all the beings on it, not just now but in the future as well, as the food choices we make. More of the Earth's surface is affected by agriculture than by any other human activity, and of course through our attempts to feed ourselves from the oceans, we also have a major disturbing effect on the oceans. And now we increasingly realize the impact that we're having on our climate and therefore on the planet as a whole as well. So that, I think, puts what we eat pretty centrally among the ethical issues that we need to address. And that's what I'm going to be talking about now. So here are some of the choices that we might consider making in terms of thinking about what we eat. There's, oops, sorry. There's a number of different ways in which we could eat. The standard American diet, sometimes abbreviated to STAD, is a diet that's very heavy in meat products, or animal products more generally, I should say, and they are overwhelmingly produced from intensive farms, from factory farms as they're often called. So I'm going to have a look at that and some of those implications. And then there's a range of other options here. Obviously I'm going to address vegetarian and vegan diets. They won't be a surprise to anyone given the sponsorship of the talk. But I'm not only going to talk about that, I'll talk a little bit about questions about whether it's better to choose organic, whether it's better to choose local, and whether it's better to choose fair trade products. So that's roughly the range of issues that I want to talk about. And I still won't be able to cover everything, but we do have quite a lot of time for questions. So if there's things that I don't cover that you want to hear about, save them up for questions and we'll get a chance to discuss them. Well, these are the three major issues that I'm going to be talking about. The questions about animals. I just have to say a bit about the moral status of animals and whether we're entitled to use them for food, and in particular whether we're entitled to use them for food the way that we are. The environmental impact, and issues also about the world food crisis, by which I mean the fact that food prices have risen over the last couple of years, and the United Nations tells us that more people are hungry again after many years of reductions in the number of people in the world who are hungry. We seem, unfortunately, to have started back on an uptick. We don't know how long that'll last, but it's certainly something that we ought to be concerned about. When I talk about using animals, animals is a vast category, and in fact the animals that we eat is a vast category, ranging from cows and pigs and chickens and lamb, most commonly anyway in this country, to right at the other end of the scale, you might say, clams and oysters, rather simple organisms. So in a way, thinking ethically, it's not going to be very likely that exactly the same sort of ethical principles will apply to such a wide range of beings with such different capacities. But what's an essential minimum for me is that we're talking about conscious beings. That is, we're talking about beings who have some sort of subjective states that you can ask, what is it like to be that being in this state? At a minimum, a being is conscious if it has a capacity to feel pain. Of course, conscious beings may have much more than that. We're conscious, we have much more than that, and so do some non-human animals have capacities to feel much more than pain. But if you can feel pain, then you are a conscious being. So the first question to ask in thinking about the moral status of animals is, well, are animals conscious? So that's a question that hardly anyone spends much time with now, because it's very hard to find anyone who really would deny that animals are conscious. There have been periods in history when people have denied that. The French philosopher René Descartes famously denied it, and more recently we had a behaviorist movement in psychology which didn't so much deny that animals are conscious as say that animal consciousness is not a question for science, because all we can do is observe behaviour.